Hi, welcome back. Coming to about the halfway mark. How is everybody doing with the material, mindset, issue planning? Can you guys not hear me? Oh. Okay, maybe now. Okay. I've literally been talking this whole time and no even responses. What's going on? Okay. Well, hi. What I was saying is we're almost to the halfway mark. How's everybody doing? How's your mindset? How's your planning? How's the material? What's going on in your brains? I want the update. Now I know you're not talking. So, Helen.
Yeah, sorry. All right, I'll go.
I can see you smiling. So I'm like,
always willing to talk. Yeah. I think it's really good. I'm really glad that I'm doing this because I think there's like a lot of stuff that I just like, wouldn't have done on my own or wouldn't have like pushed myself to actually like think about that I'm like loosely being forced to think about because of this, which is good. I think it's also just like there's like so many things that it's like a little bit overwhelming. Like even just this week trying to figure out like the insurance contract thing because I knew that I was in group contracts from my most recent employer, but like you're like, oh well, just because you don't work there, my previous one, and I was like, uh-oh. So like trying to just figure all that out is like a little bit overwhelming, but like in an exciting kind of good way, I think most of the time. So
did you get very far like calling people? Were you able to get answers? No. So annoying.
No. Yeah, and it's like frustrating because for some of them that I was trying to call, you like can't get past an automated system. Like once your NPI or like your tax ID, which I give them, they're like, oh well, like you're not like one of the providers, or like we don't have your number or something, and so then you like can't get to an actual person. So it's been relatively unsuccessful so far, but I'm gonna keep trying. So we'll see.
And I think maybe you can even keep like maybe some documentation of like, I have attempted to do this with this company on this date. Here's my hang up, just so that in the future, like if you kind of throw your hands in the air and you're like, I think I did as much as I can, and it ever comes back to you, at least you can.
That's what I was thinking too. I was like, I at least can like say I tried to figure
like,
it out.
Tell me what to do.
Yeah, like I'm willing to do this. I just don't know how.
I mean, the reality is if you get in trouble, they're really just going to, it's like a letter that's going to say like, you can't do this, fix it. Right.
Like a slap on the wrist type of thing.
Right. Like you're not going to lose your license or anything crazy.
If you get that letter, will that just like take you to the ultimate boss, like the person you need to talk to then?
Right, maybe.
Yeah, Yeah, you're like, send me the letter. Who do I talk to? Yeah, that's been like a little bit frustrating this week. And they're also only open like normal business hours, which is like so hard to like find the time to be like, oh, well, I can just sit on hold with you for like 30 minutes in the middle of my day.
Yes.
But otherwise, things are good.
Okay. Awesome. Anyone else been working on that process of getting out of contracts? Not yet.
I guess I have a question. And I think we kind of went over it last week or maybe in one of the lectures, but like if I'm currently working for a clinic, I went from like a smaller practice to a bigger practice very recently because it was purchased. So I think I'm at a group, but if it was an individual contract, I could charge cash, but they can't submit. No, they can't. I think you said they can't. Like, I just have to get out of it, period. So like, is there really, I mean, I know plenty of people do a side hustle and like charge cash. Like, who can you charge cash for if you are?
Right. So they don't know this rule, most likely, right? But maybe they have been in group, maybe they work for like a hospital-based outpatient, right? And they're in group contracts with all those people. So then it doesn't matter. The hardest people that can't really get away with this is like if you work already in like a small clinic, right? You probably have individual contracts and then you're trying to do a side hustle at the gym or something. It's probably
not going to work.
Yeah.
Okay.
But a lot of people do, they just don't realize, or they do realize and they don't care. But we're going to tell you the rules. You can do what you want.
Which we appreciate.
Right. Right. Need to at least know.
Timeline on that, like, because I know you said like even if you don't work for them anymore, like you might still be in those individual contracts. If it was like a year ago, is it still?
I think it depends.
Don't you have to like renew it every year? I don't know.
Barely.
Okay. All right. So I still need to call everybody. Okay. All right.
I think most of them you have to renew your contact information and everything with that insurance company every year. So I mean, probably if it's been more than a year or two, like I would think you'd be fine, but still might be worth checking. Yeah.
Okay. I'll keep trying.
Right.
At least you could say you tried.
And you'll know when your patient submits a super bill and you get a note back from Blue Cross Blue Shield or whoever saying like, you're in network with us. But it won't be the same for every insurance company. Like just because you're in individual contracts with some from your small employer or not, like you might be in group in others. So I know that's so crazy.
Yeah, and then
just planning to
go ahead.
If we're just planning to do cash based and we're not going to do super bills, does it matter? Still.
It still is an issue of like breach of contract. So it's still a legal issue. It's just you're not going to get caught because nobody's giving away the evidence that you're doing that.
Right. Okay. Like you're still in breach of the contract, just they're not going to tell on you. Basically, like out of network, you're giving the patient material to tell that insurance company. But if you are only cash based, like there's not communication. Hopefully, like there's always a chance that somebody communicates with their own insurance company. But if you're purely cash, it's like you're still in breach of the contract, but probably no one's gonna tell the insurance company.
Right. Mm-hmm. And that's where you guys will hear about like ABNs, advanced beneficiary notices, where you're basically asking the patient to sign saying, I'm not going to submit this. So you're getting agreement from them to say, I'm not going to submit and give away this information that we're doing this way, but you still are in breach of contract if you have a contract with that insurer. So it's like an ethics issue.
Do you do an ABN anytime you take cash from somebody who carries insurance that you're not contracted with?
Is that part of being cash-based?
Say that question again.
Do you have to have everybody fill out an ABN to participate in cash-based?
No.
No, not if you don't have a contract with that person's. So some people will do that for Medicare patients.
Yeah.
So that's another thing where it's like your own risk tolerance in that gray area. Some people will see Medicare patients for cash and then have them sign an ABN that says, I'm not going to submit to insurance. But again, that's like a gray area where you're not really technically supposed to do that, but some people do it anyway if they want to see that patient population.
Got it. Because we've used ABNs when people go over their cap and Medicare might not cover it, so they'd be responsible
But
Right.
that's fine.
at the beginning.
Yeah. And that's different because those patients, now it's no longer medically necessary. So Medicare wasn't going to pay anyway. So it's essentially wellness at that point.
Right.
We're warning the patient. The ABN is to tell the patient, like, you're responsible for this payment.
Gotcha.
Okay, cool. Good questions.
I couldn't click on a draft super bill. I don't know if I was doing something wrong, but
I
it was
think-
like,
Didn't you email me about that, Helen? Oh, somebody else did. Oh, Ezra did. I thought I went in and fixed it.
oh, let me check again.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
I, again, as we've moved all the material over from one platform, I think it just basically got like screenshotted. You guys can make them however you want. Those are just kind of, it's just a template to show you all of the necessary info. Okay. Anything else front of mind? Lauren, did you have a question earlier? Or you already got it all answered?
If I did, I forgot it.
Oh,
So
okay.
it'll come back.
Okay. Okay, good. Well, thanks for writing in this document. This shared group document has been really helpful to see what you guys are kind of running into. But before we get to that stuff, let's talk about cancellation policies. So, Kate, what was the biggest thing that you were running into with homework this week?
So I think one thing, I know in the homework you were kind of just typing out, this is what I think I'll do. Make sure you're actually spelling it out. Like take the time to go through and write out a full cancellation policy that you would give to a patient. So you get used to putting that language out there and like, this is exactly what I'm going to tell them. And I think it looked different for everyone, but just make sure that it's something you are comfortable enforcing. And then some people were talking about like, I'm going to give one freebie or two, or I'm going to like, whatever you decide it is. Like, I think people do this differently. At least what we do is like, rather than writing that into the policy where you're like, you have one time where it's just a freebie, like I just write the policy how it is. And then you can always make exceptions. But I think sometimes people get into trouble where they write this policy that's like, we always know something comes up. And if it's the first time, we're not going to enforce it. Like, I don't think you need to necessarily put that in your policy. Like, it's kind of up to you once you have it written, whether you enforce it or not. But try to write something that you can enforce. And then if you're going to give a little bit of wiggle room of like, was it 24 hours? Was it 12? Were they sick? Like, you can always work with the patient, but definitely write it out. Like get used to putting that in language in a way that this is what you're going to actually present to the patient, because you'll want to be upfront with that too. Like whether that goes in your intake form or it's on your website or both, you will want your patients to see that before they come in.
Can I ask a dumb question about that? It might be a dumb question. It feels like a dumb question. So if
I'm
you're
sure it's
going
not.
to charge somebody, how do you actually charge them? Like, is it just like the next time you see them, you're like, oh, you had like a late cancel or whatever the policy was, like you now owe me X amount? Like, what if they just like fall off the face of the earth and they never come back? Like, is there a way? Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't quite
Mhm.
know what to do about all of that.
Yeah. So it's not a dumb question. And yeah, David, it's a good question. This is why Kate's saying, like, whatever your policy is, you need to be able to enforce it, right? Because it's a hard like follow-up to do. And you're right, some people will fall off the face of the earth and you'll never see them again and you'll never get that money. Okay. Some people will hold a card on file. I suppose you could charge that card. I don't do that, but I just send an invoice. So if you're using a payment system like Square, for example, there's a whole section where I can send an invoice. So I use that for my virtual patients, but I also can use that to send a cancellation fee. And if they don't pay it, then I just send them the reminder over and over.
And what you can also do if you are selling packages, which if you're cash based, most of you probably will do, is like you can, especially if your cancellation policy is the full price of that session, you just deduct one of those sessions from their package, which is really easy to do because you don't even have to invoice them. It's just like, we're going to act like you used that session and then you just move forward.
Yeah.
So that can actually be the easiest way because you don't have to actually charge them anything new.
Yeah.
No, that's like a super good question, Helen. And I think it like really speaks to physical therapy mindset. Cause like when somebody cancels in an outpatient, you just like let it ride, right? But like this is our time, like, and they're gonna damn well, respect my time too. So like that's a good question. Like very good. And I like that I like both those answers. So those two questions.
I think it's really important that we set that standard for our patients as small business owners, and that just like David said, it is part of our habit to not charge or like not to care as much because we don't own this company, right? But anytime somebody has to late cancel on me who's also a small business owner, they literally are like, make sure you charge me. They tell me that. Right. And I do the same. Like if I'm like running late or something, I'm like, oh my gosh, charge me. Like we all would do that. And so we just need to remember that we're like projecting our assumptions on, and some people will push back and some people won't pay. But for the most part, if you are just like, this is my policy, and like you took my 8 a.m., which is my most popular spot. Sorry. But
and that's why you put it in writing too, because when you do have to enforce it, you want to be able to say, you signed off on this, you got the paperwork, you were aware of the policy, because it's hard to enforce it when you just tell them without seeing it in writing. So as long as you put that in your intake forms and they've read it and they've initialed it, like then you have that ground to enforce it.
And Helen, when I send my invoice, if I suspect that they're going to be a patient who's kind of like pushing back, I will attach their signed form. And I just write it like per the cancellation policy. I try to be nice. I'll be like, hey, did you just forget about me? But like, sorry, I missed you. I don't see you on the schedule. So let's make sure to get you scheduled. But just so you know, per the cancellation policy, I'm going to have to charge you for this session. Here's your bill.
Can I
Yeah,
say one more
makes
thing?
sense.
Because I've been reading a ton on stuff like this too. It's like we're screening people to be our patients, right? Like, and if they're gonna disrespect us by doing this more than once, especially, it's like you don't really want them as a patient, do you? So, that's kind of the process of the way I look at it too. So,
Yeah.
And you'll
I'm just
also
curious.
find too, like when you've worked at these high volume clinics, like you don't get as many cancellations. Like it's not where I worked before, it was a consistent thing all the time. And now it's rare. So hopefully you won't have to enforce it that often.
Yeah.
I kind of think it would help with compliance to come to appointments. Like at Orange Theory, that's like my best cancellation model. It's like you have 8 hours prior. And it's like if you cancel late and you call and you have a good reason, usually they don't charge you. So I feel like you could almost use that. And then it's like usually the guilt of knowing they don't have any good reason they're skipping, they're not gonna call you or say anything. So just take the fee. That's how it works for me in those classes anyway. I'm just like, all right, well, I'm sleeping in and I lost $15 and that's on me.
But if it's 150, that's a little different. Yeah.
I guess you'd get up and go.
Mhm.
I think
Did
you're,
you guys change or, oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was just curious with, I mean, hopefully it will not be an issue much longer, but I was just curious how, if you changed your cancellation policy or your enforcement during
Oh, that's a good question. So like I have mine all written out, like no, like, oh, we'll give you a freebie written in, but I never charge people when they're sick. And I never charge people if their kid is sick and they're home with their kid, or there's like unexpected weather, whatever. But yeah, during COVID, it was literally like people be like, I have a sniffle and I'm afraid to come in. And we were like, don't come in. Right. And so
Yeah.
we were like, nobody come in. So it's fine. But I'm sure people took advantage of that. Hopefully we never have a global pandemic again.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Exactly.
David just asked, do you send appointment reminders? We do, and it's just automated from, you can do it either from Square, I use WebPT, but it's like an email or text reminder that they can sign up for the day before.
And a lot of them you can set when it sends. So like we send ours 48 hours in advance. That way, if somebody gets it on, let's say Sunday, or let's say Saturday, but their appointment's on Monday, they still can like cancel that and not be charged. But you can, yeah, you can do it however you want to.
Helen just asked if you let people do a payment plan. So I think that depends on the situation. Like I don't advertise that we do that. Like I don't put it on the website, or I wouldn't offer that up front. I have had a couple people who like have a high deductible, or for whatever reason, they're like, I need to split these up into payments, and I charge them something every 2 weeks or every month. And it's worked because there are people who are actually like, I hold them accountable, and I have my office manager just like send them an invoice on that date, but it's not something I would advertise. I don't know. Sarah, do you do that at all?
No, not really, unless, so we did have one woman who was MVA, so she wasn't used to paying for her appointments. We were billing her motor vehicle insurance, but she no-showed a bunch, and we charged her for those and not her insurance, right? We can't charge her insurance for that. So, and she pushed back, I really can't afford it, blah, blah, blah. And I just kept pushing back, and I was like, okay, well, we can split these up into payments. So we did that. But I don't write that in as an option.
You have to be a network to take motor vehicle.
No, and we'll talk about this. I forget which week, but coming up, that is an insurance contract that you can take as you want to or not. Yeah.
Is
So-
workers' comp the same, or is it just car? Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of nice. Like, especially if you're treating, let's say you're treating your hikers, right? And they're cash, but then one of them gets in a car accident, you actually can utilize their car insurance for that care. That's kind of nice. Yeah. But then you really have to be good about your documentation. And if they no show on you, you can't bill their car insurance for that. That's the caveat there. No, I don't do a payment plan, but I don't think, like Kate said, I don't think you're going to have very many people that are looking for that in this model.
That's what I was curious about. I didn't really want to, because it just seemed like you would wind up in a situation where you just like keep chasing people for payments, kind of like the cancellation thing. But I wasn't sure if a lot of people were like asking for it, if there was like if like people tend to do it or not do it. So that's where I was coming from. But yeah, okay, cool. That's helpful.
Yeah.
And I think that probably happens more, like I've only seen that with my insurance-based patients. And I think it's because sometimes when people have a really high deductible but like maybe not so high that it's not going to get covered. So I had somebody who is like $1,000, and then he knew all of his sessions after that were going to be covered 100%. So for those first $1,000, he was like, I know I'm going to be coming into PT for a while. So he was like, can I just spread out those payments? And then I started to get paid from Blue Cross after that money was made. So I think it's probably more common with insurance space where they're like, I know I just have to hit this high deductible and then it'll get covered after that.
How long does it take insurance to pay you?
So it's really quick for me. Like I don't want to mess with anything I'm doing because I submit on Wednesdays and we get paid on Saturdays. But I've heard that that is not typical. So I'm like, I'm never going to hire like an external billing service. I'm never going to do anything different than what I do right now. But yeah, for us, it's like a few days turnaround, which is crazy. But I think for others, it can be weeks or even months. I don't know. Got lucky. Just do everything manually. Like, I think that's why, because we just submit everything manually through Availity versus like an external billing service that goes through all this other stuff. So one benefit of doing it yourself.
If you take like an HSA, is there anything like that? Yeah. Like, is there any documentation, anything that you have to have for that? That's just
With HSA, usually no, because they're just running a card, right? Like it's like a debit card that has their funds on it. If it's an FSA, like a flexible spending account, they usually pay with like their credit card, let's say, and then they submit to get reimbursed out of that account. So sometimes those folks will still want the super bill or like even just an invoice that says like physical therapy on this date cost. Just as like proof that they were using it for a medical reason. But there's not really anything else that you should need to do. They just need to make sure they have money in their account. But again, when you swipe it, it'll say like, there's no funds. Okay, so cancellation policy wise, circling back to this, do any of you feel comfortable charging your full amount? Your full session amount? No. Why? Melissa, I'm just watching your face right now. Going through your head.
I think it already would be hard enough for me. I hear and it makes sense that we should be charging people money, but it's so difficult for me. I think it would be hard, at least initially, for me to charge the full amount. Just to like step my toes in the water a little bit at a time.
So how much would you be willing to charge?
I mean, I think like at least in my mind, at least like a 50% of what the visit would be.
Yeah. Lauren. Yeah. What about Kate? Do you use the Google review strategy now?
I don't. I've never used it actually.
Oh, okay. This is my secret strategy. So I charge the full amount for sure, but there is pushback, of course. And so when that happens, especially if it's like the first offense, I usually will just ask them like, okay, no problem. I totally understand, happens. I'm going to waive it this time, but if you wouldn't mind, we'd really love you to leave us a Google review. Here's the link. And then usually they're like, oh yes, I will totally do that. Thank you. And they never no show again or cancel or whatever. So that helps my Google, right? And then they're happy, I'm happy, they never do it again. So that's a trick.
Does anybody ever review and say, so great, they didn't charge me a cancellation?
No. No. I've only had a few people ever really, like Helen, you were asking, like that have completely fallen off. So, and what's nice about most of these automated systems is when you do send an invoice through them, you can track like if they viewed it. I can see sometimes they haven't viewed this email, so they may not be ignoring me. It just maybe went to their spam or something. So there's good resources out there, I think, to help us collect.
Do you say that was through Square?
Yeah, I use Square.
Okay. You feel like that's a good option for a card reader situation?
Yeah. But if you are going to take insurance and you need more robust EMR, then a lot of the EMR systems have built-in scheduling and payments and stuff. So it just depends on what your needs are.
So like Sarah and Kate, when you were going, I mean, I don't know how much you thought about your cancellation policy before. It's probably why you're teaching us now, but like, were you in the same mindset of a lot of us, like, oh, I can't charge $150, you know, the full price because nobody's going to pay that. And then like with confidence, you realize like, this is how much my time's worth. You know, would you say that's where you were at, or what was your thought process? Like, put yourself in our shoes, basically.
Yeah. Well, for me, I think that's a really good question. I was working in settings where if I had a cancellation rate on my stats, like my clinic stats, let's say I was at 15% cancellation and I'm like getting reprimanded for that, but I would get furious because I know that the front desk wasn't enforcing this cancellation policy. So I think I've just always been like, that is so unfair. I think we should, if we're going to have this policy, enforce it. So for me, I was like, from day one, I am charging 100% of my fee. I was like adamant about it. But I do think it scares people into not missing their appointments.
Well, and I think it's also knowing that like you want the patients that want to see you. So at least with my cancellation policy, like I don't enforce it that often because I don't need to. So like there are people that come up where they'll text the day of and like something comes up that's legitimate, but like it happens so infrequently that I don't really think about it. Like the hardest part for me at this point is actually taking someone up on it when they're like, please charge me the full amount and like deduct it from my package. And then my instinct is to be like, no, it's okay, it's fine. I'll get stuff done during your session. And like I had to do that to myself like twice in the past week. Weirdly, like I had two people with packages who canceled last minute where it was like one just forgot. Like she'd gone to 7 in a row and made every appointment and then just forgot. And then the other one like took her dog into the vet in some emergency thing in the morning. And both of them texted me like, please charge me the full amount of my session, deduct it from my package. And it took so much willpower for me to not text them back like, no, don't worry about it. So like that's my struggle more of like when they offer it to actually be like, yes, my time is worth that much. And now I have this hour that's free that I'm still getting paid for, that I am going to get this other stuff done. But like they should have been here and that's their responsibility. It's not on me to lose that money when I could have filled that spot. So it's like it's a struggle still. But I think the good thing is you shouldn't have to worry about it very often. And if the person comes up that is consistently canceling on you, like you should feel fine enforcing that because you probably don't want them as a patient anyway. So if that policy like turns them away and they don't want to come in anymore, like that's probably not a patient you wanted in the first place.
I also think it's easier. So kind of circling back to your question, David, it's easier to send them an email or an invoice to kind of say what your policy is or like say it than to call them. Right. So not that you want to be like passive aggressive, but that's just a little bit easier to put it out there. And then I think with practice, it's like you have to force yourself to do it a few times, but then what will happen is you will get paid or those people won't be, you know, canceling off of your schedule. So you'll just be kind of like teaching yourself that it's okay to ask for that. It just takes a couple of repetitions for it to happen.
Well, I have a question. Working with kids, I
Yeah.
do get a lot of cancellations just because they get sick and, you know, very easily. So I had written in mine that if they, as long as they message me, like text me or call me an hour before, like if the kid is sick and they text me an hour before, they won't be charged. Should I put something like that in there, or should I just kind of, like you guys were saying, do the blanket like 24-hour cancellation? If you no show or don't cancel in that time, it's going to be, I guess, like with kids, should I do that exception or no? Like in my actual written policy?
Right. I wonder if instead of the exception, you could make it like a smaller window, like 12 hours or something. Like Morgan was saying at Orange Theory, they do like an 8-hour. That way it's like, you're basically saying like, if you wake up in the morning and kiddo's sick, obviously that's okay. But if you're telling me 2 hours before your appointment, like that's not okay. I don't know. What do you think?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think you want it like more on the strict side, but not so strict that you won't enforce it at all.
Okay.
Right. So like I wouldn't do your cancellation policy as like the minimum you're willing to accept, because then people take advantage of you and you don't have that written. But I would push it closer to like, this is what I want to enforce most of the time. And if you have one person call you an hour before and you decide that's okay, you can waive it. But personally, I probably wouldn't write that in, because then you basically have no cancellation policy, right? Like, because you're not doing anything to reschedule someone or like fill that time for yourself if you only have an hour notice, right? So I feel like if you're going to be that broad and that generous, like you probably might as well not have one, right? Like, because if you're giving them that long, I think you're kind of just flexible.
I am very flexible. That's probably
So maybe you don't have a cancellation policy, maybe you don't need one. But I think that is the question, right? Is like, you probably want some kind of policy, but if it's getting that close to the appointment, like to me, that's kind of no cancellation policy.
no, and I think I need one. I need to learn to set those boundaries.
Yes,
So,
yes. Mhm.
That's hard. Also, like if patients come in late, right? Like what we don't have to worry about anymore, unless you are taking insurance, is you don't have to worry about timed units, right? So it's like, this is your hour. If you came 20 minutes late, like it's the same cost. And if I can go over, if I have a break, like maybe I will, but that's not, it's not this amount of money for this hour, for this amount of time. It's the session. But again, you can't do that with MVA. Like it is time code units. So, or insurance. Okay, should we talk about pricing? Okay. Initial thoughts. Scary to put your prices out there. Ezra, what's going through your head?
So yeah, my initial thought is, I feel like what I know that we're worth and like what we should be charging is a different number than what I think people in the area might pay. So I'm kind of struggling with that. Like, okay, say I think that it should be like a 150 a visit or something. I'm like, I can't picture anyone at my gym paying that, but I don't know if that's me thinking that or if that's actually the area. And I think it's probably more me, but I don't know.
Have you done any research in your area, like looking at other websites to see what people are pricing their services at?
Yes, so there's only one other out of network clinic nearby, and it's like a mile away, and my wife works there, so that's also another thing. But their evals are 115 for an eval and like 85 for a follow-up, which I already thought was kind of maybe on the lower side. And they also, that 85 for a visit will come down to like 65 with a package deal. And I think they can only do that because they also have like this whole recovery thing. So like they're getting people in the door so that they can do like cryo and Normatec and all kinds of other stuff. So I'm a little worried that people might choose that option, but they're also not like a CrossFit specialty or a tennis specialty or like the other things that I'm trying to target. But like there's already a couple people from my gym who I know who go there. So like it's kind of a little bit of a barrier.
What about, have you looked into the price of like personal training or massage in your area?
So
too.
yeah, there's the owner of my gym does some personal training out of the gym, and he charges $100 an hour, and he says people are happy to pay it and it's okay. So I think some people will pay for it, but I'm just worried, like I can't picture myself having that like 20 plus per week, but of patients, but I don't know if that's my limitation or real.
Well, that is a good goal for patient volume, but I think I wouldn't worry about that yet. I'd worry about like your 5 a week right
Okay.
now.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you can find 5 a week that will pay. I mean, I can't believe they're only charging 80 or 85 or whatever.
Yeah. They do a lot of like they have a front office staff that does a lot of work for like submitting things for the patient for out of network. And I think there's a whole process they go through that works for them, but because they're a little bit bigger. So yeah, and it's like 1.2 miles away or something. So, but besides that, there's nothing else like it in the area.
Well, and I think you can almost work that to your advantage, like assuming you don't price yourself too high. Sometimes when you are priced a little bit higher, people think you're better, right? So it's like they're seeing a discount at the other place, but if you see that and you're aware of that, but you still price yourself at 130, 140, 150, like it's not so different that you're in a totally different market where some of those people can still afford it. But I think you could have a little bit of a benefit of like they see that price and they're like, okay, it is more expensive. Like this is going to be worth my time, which is a whole confidence issue, right? Where you're like, I need to be worth that then. But I think sometimes pricing yourself a little bit higher makes people think that you are worth that, right? So like they're gonna sometimes choose an option that is a little more expensive if they think you're gonna get better outcomes, better experience, like whatever it is.
That's a good point.
I just learned something that made me feel more comfortable with charging 125 or 150. I'm currently seeing an outpatient PT. He used to be a colleague of mine for neck pain. So, and he does his own side thing at a CrossFit gym, but he also works in outpatient for the hospital system that I work for. And I was talking about a patient that I wanted to refer to him and whether to do his side practice or the hospital because they're uninsured and just financially don't have a ton of money. But what he told me was that at the hospital, when they bill, like they bill an eval and then 1 or 2 codes, CPT codes, and it's like $300 what the hospital's billing. And if you are out of pot, like if you don't have insurance, they'll do 50% of that. So the hospital's still making $150 off of somebody without insurance, So it made me feel like that's not who I'm going to be marketing to, although I would obviously treat that population. But so somebody, like it just made me feel better going, the hospital's charging this for people who are uninsured. Like I'm okay with charging it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, hey, don't you have some contracts that you end up like charging the patient more when they're using their insurance than out of pocket?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. And we've raised our cash rate, so it's a little bit more equal to our insurance rate. But that is what's interesting too, is like sometimes these people with a high deductible plan end up like for those visits that aren't covered, they actually pay a little bit more than they would if they were doing a cash rate or if they were, especially if they were buying a package. So I think it's tricky, but I think you can also compare yourself to those in-network clinics and what they're probably getting reimbursed from insurance, because sometimes the patient is paying that too.
So with some like giving the patient a super bill, do either of you know about the percentage that the patient gets reimbursed versus what you're charging? So if you're charging $150 per session, are they being reimbursed like $100 a session kind of thing? Like, do you know what the price points are for what they're being reimbursed?
So it totally depends on the plans. What's kind of cool is that the provider will get a copy of the EOB. So I get to see everything that the patient is also seeing. And there are certain insurance companies that pay zero all the time. And there are some that pay literally every cent. So I would say on average, like we charge 165. I bet that on average people get $90 back in my area with those.
And I think that's what's so different too, is like, if for me, like it doesn't even make sense for me to give a super bill to most of my cash patients, because they often have like their deductibles out of network are so high that it doesn't even touch it. So they have like a $9,000 out of network deductible. So when I talk about a super bill, it's like, why would I even submit this? It's not going to do anything. But it's dependent on their plan and your area, and it's different for every patient.
Have either of you ever considered doing like you submit on the patient's behalf and get reimbursed to you, and like you take a copay each visit?
Right. I do not do that.
No, we don't do that either. I mean, like when we're in network, we do that. But to me, that's part of the benefit of being cash-based or not accepting that insurance, is that you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
But there are some other clinics around here that will do that for the patient.
Because that's what my boss and I used to do at our my old clinic, is we would be the ones to submit. And so we would just take usually the specialist charge on their insurance card. So that was usually like $50 to $75. And it truly depended on the insurance. So yeah.
So then you submitted, the insurance company gave it to you and you gave them. How did that work?
We didn't give them anything. Like we would give them a service. They would give us $50 as a copay. Because if we didn't charge them anything, it was considered a kickback from the insurance. If we just got paid, we had to take something. So we would usually take like $25 to $75, again, depending on what their specialist like copay was for their regular insurance.
Right.
So we would charge that for every visit up front, like you almost would as if you were in network. And then we would bill out and the insurance companies would reimburse us. And I think the reason why Russ was doing that primarily is because he saw a lot of teachers, and teachers in New Jersey had very good insurance with out of network benefits for PT. So to charge them up front, like he found this to be like a lower barrier to entry. So people weren't scared off by seeing like the 160 charge per visit, but you'll get that back later. But the issue with that is he would sometimes eat the cost with not being reimbursed via the insurance.
And some people will submit on behalf of the patient. The patient gets reimbursed, and then you're responsible for collecting from the patient. But that's like, to me, that is
have them bring the check in from
Right.
the insurance company and sign it over to us.
right. So you can do all of those things, but it can be really confusing to the patient too.
Yeah, explaining it was always fun.
Like,
Hmm?
I think it can be like, oh, is my microphone not working now?
No, I can hear you.
Just pause on my computer. Like I think it can also be misleading for the patient sometimes. Like if they think you're submitting to their insurance, that they don't know in network, out of network sometimes. And I think sometimes if you're like, oh yeah, we'll submit to your insurance, like they think that they're getting benefits that they might not be. So I think that's just like a tricky area where you need to be really clear.
Yeah,
that
we
you're
definitely
submitting and like, mhm.
we definitely were like we would definitely say like, so we are an out of network clinic. And then if they didn't have any out of network benefits, then that was a whole different conversation. But if they did have out of network benefits, we were like, we don't take insurance, but we work with insurance, and then we kind of go through that whole process.
Yeah.
That's the tricky part, because like saying it like that is really smart. But what we have heard some people say is, yes, we take your insurance, but like we're out of network. But the patient just hears like, you take my insurance, right? And so it's really confusing. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's tricky. I have been told by some patients that they like the paying upfront because they just know what the cost is going to be and they just know what to expect. Every time it's the same cost. They don't have like variable. Sometimes there's variable costs when you're going through the, I don't know, insurance.
Yeah, depending on what you're billing that day,
Right.
kind of.
Right. So
So Morgan just asked about like financial aid or sliding scale. So I think not necessarily talking about that specifically, but like that concept in general. And we just have a few minutes left. So I kind of want to just talk about this idea of like, I think a lot of times when we're setting prices, it's like this idea that before we've even set the price, we're worried about saving the patient money. Where like that's our first instinct is like, what if my patient can't afford this? Or what if like that's not in their budget? Or how can I make this as cheap as possible for them? Right? Of like, can I do a 30-minute session? Can I do a 5-minute session? Can I make an option available to them that's like the lowest cost possible? And I feel like we kind of get into this rabbit hole of like, how can I like discount my services so much that I can reach everyone and not be inaccessible? But I think that allows us to really like undervalue ourselves, where like you kind of, you know what you should be charging, like Ezra, you were saying, but then you go immediately from there to like, what do I think people would pay? What would I pay? How can I make this more affordable for them? Like, I don't want any pushback. So I think it's hard, but like trying to set your prices at what is this actually worth and what is an hour of my time worth and what do I think is the best plan of care for this patient before you start thinking about like, what is my patient's financial situation? Because like that's not our concern, really. Like I think we start getting into our patients' heads of like, are they gonna think about this? Like what conversations are they gonna have? But that's not on us to decide. Like we just need to decide what our price is for our service, and there will be certain people who can afford it and want it and value it, and other people that can't or won't. And I think it's a different question when you start thinking about accessibility and like, is there this underserved population that I want to reach? And I think that's a whole different question that can involve insurance and other things. But when you're just talking about your main demographic and your market, it's like, what am I providing? What's an hour of my time worth? And what do I actually want to get? Before you start going down this, like, what can they afford? Are they going to value it? Like, you need to just put your price out there first and just let people
respond to it. Because I think we can get in this habit of like, I think I'm worth 150, but I would only pay 60, or this other person is doing 65. And then like you just start like offering discounts to people before they've even asked for it, which you don't need to do.
Morgan, what are your thoughts on that?
That makes sense. I think in my head, I've kind of just got the idea that like to advertise your prices as like what you ideally would charge. And then if somebody comes to you and they're like, you know, poverty stricken, but nobody will see them for their neck pain, you can kind of work that out with them privately and do it kind of case by case. I got the whole like bleeding heart problem of I want everybody to be able to have care. Not a good business move, but so I'm trying to figure out how to make that like a sustainable thing to work in.
Yeah. What's cool is when you work for yourself, you can do what you want, right? So like we had a CrossFit athlete who we'd worked with on and off who lost her job during COVID, as many people did. And we did offer her a handful of sessions at no cost, right? And that was like our decision. We set a number that we were going to do. And it just was like, that's just like our way of, you know, she's been a frequent customer. She's probably going to refer people to us. And that was our choice to do that for her.
But I think the important thing about that too is like you can only do that once you've established your business by making money from seeing other patients. Like
So you can pay her
so
bill.
that can't be like your sustainable business model right off the bat. Like you need to have enough full price paying patients to enable you to have the salary you need and pay your employees and keep the lights on to offer those things. So it's like you're charging a reasonable amount and you're charging your value so you can help more people. But if you're starting of this place of like, how can I only offer services that are worth like $30 or how can I bring everything down? Like you're going to be in a harder position when it comes to actually helping them because you just don't have the funds available. So it's like once you have established that, you have the freedom to be like, I'm going to treat this person pro bono, or I'm going to offer this program where I can get more people in the door and offer this discounted rate. But I think sometimes we try to start with that right off the bat, but you don't have that like established financial security to be able to do that.
That makes sense. Got to make money to be able to give money.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
Morgan, I'm with you. My bigger goal is to be able to make money with those that can pay it to be able to do services for those that can't. So I'm with you on that. But I have thought too, like have to have money first before I can offer that. So
Yeah. It has to be sustainable at some point. Cool. Okay, good discussion. All right. Well, keep the questions coming in the document. And oh yeah, good point, Lauren. A lot of PT schools have pro bono clinics and look for volunteer CIs. Yeah. We will send out the material tomorrow morning for the next week for week 4. Otherwise, have a good rest of your week and keep letting us know if you need anything from our end. You guys are doing good. Thanks for being such an active cohort. It's been fun. All right, everybody, have a good night. See ya.